Welcome, Richard.
Thank you for having me back on.
Yeah, you were here before. We were talking a lot about narcissism. There's an episode, I think it's the 5th or the 6th episode that I put out. I think it was called From Having Cocaine to Breakfast to Healing People.
It's a great title.
Yeah. So we're not gonna go deeply into your story. We did that on that episode and kind of how you ended up doing what you're doing. But on that though, you really, narcissism is kind of your topic.
It certainly has been, helping people to recover from narcissistic abuse in interpersonal relationships has been my topic for about 7 years. And I was working as a life coach who specialized in that. My interest now is more towards broader scale narcissistic abuse from governments to its people. So I do talk more in terms of philosophy and politics as well as psychology now. So
but I noticed that also on your social media, you're kind of transitioning in a way.
Yeah.
But I often wonder when I look at your things, you know, I've watched some of your YouTube videos, and I mean I have you on Instagram and on Facebook, and doesn't it take a lot of energy to be involved in this? Because in some way I feel that you're screaming in the wind.
To a degree. I think when I was focused very much on the psychology of anything to do with psychology, I think is a little bit of a dead end for various reasons that won't get into here. But also when you're trying to help people overcome individual narcissistic abuse, yes, you are screaming in the wind a little bit, and yes, it is tiring. I gave up doing individual coaching back in 2016 for that reason. It was physically exhausting me. What I'm doing now is much easier on me, much easier, and I feel like I'm doing more good this way. But
you're also treading into territory which is more delicate. I've seen that you've had problems with social media accepting some of your messages and stuff like that. Right?
I've been deleted. I've had 2 videos deleted and 2 strikes on my channel inside of the first 3 months of 2021. Talking about this subject. It's easier on me psychologically because I feel like I'm more in congruence with my own personal values. But it's going to be harder on the on the business. On the channels.
But I didn't really come to it when you came here before. But what are you? I mean, if you had to, I don't know, if you had to give a job title somewhere in an application.
Friend of humans everywhere. I tend to describe myself now as a content creator, just because it's the safest thing you can say. It's very hard to cancel somebody who's a content creator, and it's also really hard to deny. Like, I create YouTube videos; it is content. The subjects are around psychology and philosophy and sovereignty and personal improvement. But I think we're moving into a time where anything that you say you are can be shot down. And so I think the smartest thing to do is to have an amorphous, hard to deny title. And so I just say to people, I'm a content creator.
That's actually a good way to do it.
It's slippery.
Yeah. So you're a Republican Democrat.
That's what I said. That's what I heard.
Yeah. But we wanted today to talk a little bit about, or I wanted to get you here. I know you're leaving, so I wanted to have a chance to get you to talk to me about a few things they're very much kind of in my mind, and obviously this whole COVID thing and the reaction to that has kind of it makes me think a lot, and that is kind of, let's say, collective or society narcissism in a way, and also that and how that then connects to, let's say, lack of self-identity or the, how do you say, the challenge of finding a self-identity in the modern world for, like, kind of especially younger generations. And then maybe how that kind of wokeism connects to that. We don't really have a script here. We just there's just a few things that I'm...
Yeah, you want to wander through a minefield of really hot, controversial topics.
Yes.
Hopefully we'll come out with all of our arms and legs intact.
This is the shit that goes on in my mind when I go out and run 10 kilometers or I walk with a dog for 2 hours. So
maybe it shouldn't be called the bunker. Maybe it should be called the minefield.
But it's good to be in a bunker when the bomb starts raining, you know?
That is true.
But a little bit on narcissism and what's happening there, kind of, it's on the rise, they say. I mean, I read somewhere that it's the fastest growing epidemic after obesity since the 1980s in the US.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. It's, well, for one thing, there are probably a lot more of us than there were previously. So we've gone from a population of 1 billion to 7 billion inside of 150 years. And I don't think we can underestimate the impact of that. We are more invisible and less relevant now than at any other time. As individuals, I'm less relevant, I'm less visible, and so are you. And people listening to this would say, no, we're more visible because we have social media. And I would say that's actually not a visibility that counts to you as a human being based on your evolution. Our visibility historically for thousands and thousands of years meant that 50 to 150 people would know your name and know your purpose. And you would be a valued member of the tribe, either as a sword maker or the person who puts shoes on horses or the baker. So you'd have a function and a name, and your name would be your function. You would be Mr. Baker or Mr. Farrier. And it's critical to us, and we've lost that. It's gone. We are now nothing more than floating digital avatars. And I don't have a word for it. I was joking the other day that some German psychologists should come up with it, because German's a perfect language for this word, to create words with. We need a word for the sense of terror, anxiety, and despair we feel when we are invisible. God knows what horrendous German, they create these Frankenstein words, but we need a word for that. And where that's our problem. The real problem is the sense of despair in the face of our own invisibility and irrelevance. That's the problem. That's the virus, if you like. Narcissism is the symptom. Narcissism is the coping mechanism for that. So we tell ourselves a fantastical, childlike story that we are far more important than we really are, even as we know our importance is slowly draining away. So narcissism is just the hysterical response, if you like.
So we're hanging on to something, well, deep inside we know it's fading away.
Exactly that.
I was thinking about, so narcissism has a kind of a negative vibe around it, let's say that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I don't think you can exist without some sort of a narcissism in you. You have to believe in yourself and pride and where does narcissism, where is it healthy and when does it get unhealthy?
Well, I think it's hard to, if I could borrow from Brett Weinstein, he talks about low resolution and high resolution descriptions of problems.
Isn't that the guy that a lot of people hate?
Oh, many people hate him.
Yeah, because then my show would be cancelled. Okay, thanks.
Anybody who tells the truth and tries to be reasonable and rational is hated.
Yeah.
And what we have is a low resolution understanding generally of a pretty complex issue with narcissism. And it's neither in its nascent form, it's neither good or bad. It's as Freud would have defined it, it's the libidinous, semi-masturbatory self-regard that you have for yourself as a child. And you need that. So you put food in your mouth. And when you engage in sexual conquest, it's for you and not for other people, which would be really odd. And we would call it psychosis. If you were shoving food in other people's mouths and trying to force other people to pleasure themselves, that would be very strange. So he coined the term narcissism. And when he coined it
around this
in the psychological sense, in terms of psychoanalysis, we credit him, but actually there was people before him. I mean, Oscar Wilde was 20 years before Freud in terms of identifying narcissism specifically as an important part of human psychology. And the the picture of Dorian Gray is kind of a study of that. But to simplify it, narcissism is healthy self-regard. It's intrinsically healthy. In psychoanalytic theory, post-Freud, people started to talk about healthy narcissism to distinguish it from a separate issue, which is malignant narcissistic personality disorder. So that's where your narcissism splits from reality. And it's no longer based on any external feedback. If it's based on external feedback, even if you were an arrogant, vain prick, you wouldn't have narcissistic personality disorder. You'd be full of yourself and you would be arrogant and maybe a little obnoxious, but that's still not narcissistic personality disorder.
Okay, I'm so relieved to hear this.
We are arrogant, vain pricks, but we are not. We don't have NPD. So you actually have, it's not typically defined as being a psychotic disorder, but it has psychotic elements to it because it needs a break from reality. You need to be in a total cast iron fantasy land. And this is where the people who are experts on narcissism talk about the false self. So you have to have a made up version of you living a made up life in order to have NPD. And that's where social media kicks in and you go, hey, that sounds like what people are doing on social media. It's a made up version of you living a made up life. So it's very hard to not become over time more and more narcissistic because you're kind of through virtual reality and training yourself into a virtual way of processing reality, which becomes over time more and more psychotic. So yeah, narcissism it's necessary. It's absolutely, you should have narcissism inside of you.
But on the other hand, if there's not like a switch where you say, okay, now it's a narcissism or this person's narcissism is hurting other people.
That's an important defining component for diagnosing NPD by clinicians, which I'm not a qualified clinician for that, but there are 9 equally weighted traits that they look for, and I think you need to score 5 or 6 out of 9 to get the NPD diagnosis. But one of the most critical ones is, yes, it's exploitation of other people, punishment of your enemies, and sneaky manipulative behavior. So that's why it's associated with such nastiness. So NPD is not Freudian narcissism, is not healthy narcissism. It's like
a disorder.
Yeah, it's a disorder. So there is a healthy thing that could be in order, but it is not in order. It is disordered. It's become malignant. It's become toxified and chaotic. And it sort of requires that the person with NPD recruit people into their own reality and force them to play a role to serve the purpose of the false self and the false narrative. So then people become things.
Yeah, you're like a chocolate bar in a vending machine.
Exactly
for them.
Yeah.
But so you mentioned it now that one of the, and that's kind of where I wanted to go with this today is it's the how narcissism is actually how social media, for example, is a very useful tool for narcissism and kind of makes the self or self-image or self-identity more hollow in a way, but at the same time maybe narcissistic and so on. And now, for example, I mean, with the introduction of social media, everybody has a voice. And that gives also a sense of entitlement in a way. And I remember talking to a kid some months ago about a musician, which I didn't like. And I said, I don't like this musician. And the kid turned back and said, I'm offended. And I said, oh, okay, I don't care. And
what does that mean?
But I started thinking, okay, so with this social media, you get this high sense of self-importance, you're heard. Isn't that exactly what you need to kind of feed into this narcissist? Doesn't it make you narcissist?
It would be hard for social media to generate narcissistic personality disorder in a clinical sense because it is still it requires a fairly unique set of environmental factors, and they probably need to take place before you're 8 years old. But as people's social media usage increases in terms of just hours per day, and as their emotional investment increases, I am wondering whether it could actually generate full-blown NPD now, because it would model along the same lines of the brainwashing of political prisoners. And if you are on social media 8 or 9 hours a day, and you do that for 5 years, the difference between you and an MPD will become pretty much academic after a period of time, I think. It would be something that clinicians would argue about, but normal people would just be like, well, they're both pricks in exactly the same way. And yes, it's a hot petri dish for entitlement, for solipsism, for living a fantasy life and creating a false self and a fantasy version of your life. And it's also an echo chamber. And the algorithms are there to serve you. And so you become this precious, fragile consumer of only things that you like. And then somehow you develop the belief everything should make me feel good. So that kid who said to you, I'm offended, what he's saying is, the fact that you don't like that artist in exactly the way I do makes me feel an uncomfortable feeling. And I have the right to complain to you about this feeling of discomfort. Instead of processing it for myself quietly, like an adult, I'm going to demand that you change your opinion so my feeling goes away, which is the most barbaric iteration of collective narcissism that I think we're seeing right now. Everybody has to conform to what I want so I feel okay. What, instead of you dealing with your own feelings? Yes, change the environment, not the person.
But that's it actually, now listening to you, I because I know you're from Birmingham.
Liverpool.
Yeah.
I studied in
Studied in Birmingham, sorry, yeah. And Duran was in Birmingham. And
Right.
And this, what we're talking about, that kid that was offended for me not liking that artist, and how... then I started thinking, we had this newspaper in Iceland where people would write articles about which band was better, Wham or Duran Duran.
Right.
And this went on for years. People were writing, actual letters and handing them to the mailman, and he was taking them to the newspaper, and those were being printed, and then there was arguments back and forth.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was on a very small scale.
Yes.
Because it was just there, and it was just maybe 10 people on the Wham side and 10 people on the Duran Duran side that wanted to kind of engage in this.
Yeah.
Now I feel that maybe this is what you were talking about now is the same, but just on a much, much grander scale. People are finding venues to argue for their opinion, and they are getting validation of their opinion in the echo chamber.
Yes, and in a Stalinist sense, they are useful idiots, because who benefits from that? The newspaper did. In the 90s, I saw... went on for years, the British and American musical media, this conflated argument over who was better, Blur or Oasis.
Yeah.
That went on for years. What a fucking pointless argument that is. And then you had East Coast, much more lucrative and went on for much longer and had much more lethal consequences. East Coast versus West Coast rap, which could have possibly ended up in the killings of Tupac and Biggie, possibly. That might have been caused, or not caused by, but heated up by the hip hop media. Who benefits? Well, the people selling the magazines, the people selling the newspapers. 20 years forward, who's benefiting from all this conflict and these arguments? The social media platforms. They love it, especially Facebook is fostering confrontation and belligerence and aggression like nobody's business, because they're fighting for eyes on the screen. And they know that keeps people there. They've been losing young people's eyes since 2013. So what they did was they recalibrated and they started targeting older age groups. But they knew they couldn't keep them there with funny memes and kittens on skateboards. They could keep them there with political conflict. And so they fostered that. And they went for people our age in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I remember reading about that in 2013, and I was saying to myself, good fucking luck with that, Facebook. You won't get people over the age of 40 on here. How wrong I was. They got people in their 70s arguing on Facebook over politics. In fact, that's what Facebook is now. It's like boomers arguing political talking points and racism, and so conflict is good for business.
Yeah.
So we also live in a time where social media isn't just dialing up narcissism, it's also dialing up belligerence and aggression. Dangerous.
If we go maybe towards the parents and now I get the feeling. I mean, it's easy to sit and judge how it is today versus how it was when I was young. Like biking without helmets and all that stuff. But you still get this sense that there is some sort of an over-parenting going on in some way, and at the same time we are in in many countries we are seeing sports being you get the rewards for being last place. So our parents in the system, let's say, the sports and schools and so on, are they giving children now or young people that, let's say, the generations, the millennials and Z, have they been giving a false sense of achievement in childhood?
Yeah.
That they bring them with them into life, and then they go on social media and they see, I don't know, a celebrity having a nice time and having their nails done somewhere while drinking rum and coke. And these people, they think I should just get this.
Yes. I think one of the things to be understood with narcissism, and as you mentioned, since the 80s forward, culture has become massively more narcissistic. I think that's the research of Jean Twenge that you sent me over. I think it was her that found that 3 times more incidences of narcissism. There's a real explosion. Well, narcissists are known for being hypochondriacs, and they have the most unique and strange and unusual diseases of anybody, and you've never heard of these diseases, and they're very special and unique to them. And I think that trickles down to their children. So there's a kind of narcissism, or Munchausen's by proxy. My children are precious and special and unique, and they need extra levels of protection. They can't just be left to go out in the world and get bumped and scraped and fend for themselves. I have to watch over them. Did you not give my child a medal, but you gave other children the medal? Well, the other children ran the race faster. I don't care. Give my fucking child a medal as well. Now, I worked in the British education system in the 2000s, and I saw this. I saw parents coming into school and bullying teachers and bullying the institutions into giving children privileges and awards that they simply hadn't won by their own merits. What does that teach a child? That teaches them, I'm unique, I'm special, I'm also very fragile, I'm very precious, and I deserve to be given things. What for? For existing. Because I am a princess, I am a little prince. Of course, when they grow up and they get out into the big bad world, the big bad world doesn't reinforce these lunatic, psychotic views of their own importance. So they live in a state of permanent narcissistic injury, and it makes them bitter, resentful, and confrontational, but through the lens of their own narcissism. And that leads to polarization, extremism, and people fighting for causes they don't even really believe in. They're just trying to get this rage out, their narcissistic rage. So they've experienced narcissistic injury. They're 25. They're working some dead-end job that they absolutely hate. They demand special privileges, and their Generation X or baby boomer boss laughs in their face and says, good luck with that, kiddo. And they're furious. They're furious with the world. They're furious in a boundaryless way that is the same fury that a 3-year-old having a temper tantrum has. They're so emotionally dysregulated. They're blinded with white-hot rage. And they want to attack reality itself. I mean, governmental institutions, people, identified groups, whatever you want, they want to take it all down because they're really, really pissed off. And I think we're seeing that broad scale right now.
But that, it's interesting because on the other hand, you also see that I read an article the other day, and they were explaining how it is for a millennial, for example, in the US to come out and become an adult. And it's harder, it's financially harder than it has been ever before, which is weird because, we have more money, there are more taxes being paid anyway. Like everything is booming, and has been for years. We've had peace in the Western world for, 80, 90 years. I mean, there's prosperity and honey dripping from every tree. Yeah. But for example, I know in the UN, because that article that I read was about the US, they have, student debts are higher. It's harder to get teacher assistant jobs that pays for your education. And kind of in some way, the American dream isn't there for them somehow. Yes. So on one hand, you have maybe those those people who have in some way been overprotected and given a false identity as a goodbye present from the parents and the system.
Yeah.
And then you send them actually out to a world that is not necessarily welcoming them.
I mean, what's been done to them is extremely cruel. They're effectively crippled. I mean, they are hobbled by this entitlement. And, you know, one day, America, the UK, the modern Western world is going to have a very serious conversation about what's going on with universities. There are too many fucking students in these universities who shouldn't be there because they're too stupid to be in university. I'll say it. I don't care. They're too low IQ. They don't belong in university. But it became a booming business, and the government got greedy. They figured out a nice little scam, and I watched them do it in the UK. They were like, oh, we can push students into university, tell them that they're going to get a great job at the end of it, and we'll get them into debt. And who are they in debt to? Well, in the UK, they're in debt to the student loans company. Who owns the student loans company? The government does. It's all a government-backed. So you're a wage slave before you've even got your first job. You're indebted to the government for tens of thousands of pounds for a university degree in Star Trek, home economics and trampolining that serves precisely no fucker. Nobody wants you. And so the narcissistic injury continues. It astonishes me that in America, of all places, people are saying they can't make money and they have to live at home. It's such nonsense. America is, if you're an American and you are trained in entrepreneurialism, there is so much money to be made in America because it's a hugely populous place with plenty of available income, and they're trained in America to buy things. They're happy consumers. They love buying things. They love to be sold products. They have a very healthy attitude in America towards entrepreneurialism and to capitalism, generally speaking. Well, they did, except it's millennials and down don't. They see it as some corrupted, evil decadence, you know, because they're entrained and brainwashed into this horrible communistic, Stalinistic style of thinking. But you can make money in America, but not as a graduate and not as a social justice warrior and not as a spoiled, entitled, weak-willed millennial. But if you are a red-blooded capitalist entrepreneur, I wouldn't say the streets are paved with gold, but I work in America and I have done since 2005. There is no excuse to not make money in America. Even today, even with the economy the way it is now, you don't even, my God, when I say I work in America, I've been selling to Americans predominantly online since 2005. You don't even need America. You just choose a state. You don't even need a whole state. Choose a city. Be known in one city for your brand. You will have money, plenty of money. So these things aren't even real. These are perceptual problems. But yes, absolutely, I can see why these kids who've been spoiled and broken through the education system, they come out with a useless degree. They've been lied to. They were told if you get this degree and you go through the education system, there's a wonderful job at the end of it for you. There isn't. Even if you get a law degree now, you're fucking useless because America's got way too many people with law degrees.
Then we just have to start more useless cases to get job for them.
Well, America does a good job of that. Yeah. I
mean. But isn't that like, and that's what I feel like if I look at myself, I mean I have a long career in business and in management, and I feel for the first time, let's say over the past maybe 4 to 5 years, that a lot of the stuff that I stood for and knew and my experience is not necessarily useful today. And I'm thinking when you say this, okay, so they come out of those schools because the education system is making lawyers, economics, engineers, doctors. Yep. They're still making the old jobs.
Yes.
But the business has transformed and the transition is so fast that the needs are very different. And that comes also to it, what do I need to be today? And as a young person coming out, I can't be just a plumber. I can't be, because maybe after 15 years there won't be any plumbers. You know, maybe after 20 years there won't be any economists needed because there will just be some systems doing it and so on. And so I have a feeling that people are either, as you say, they're coming out of a system that is kind of geared towards the old way of things being. You could have a career in...
My God, you could say the education system, if you said it was rooted in a 1960s worldview, that's kind. There are things that we do in modern education across the world now that are rooted in the 1900s and 1890s. I mean, to say the world has moved on is such an understatement, but what's the problem with the education system? Well, it's run by people in the education system. With all due respect to them, there's plenty of lovely humans, well-intentioned. God bless them. I know it's a hard job. I did it for 5 years. But they're not entrepreneurs and they're not connected to the real world. Same with government. What's our problem? Well, our policies are set by politicians. What the fuck do politicians know about making things happen or getting a job done? You know, this is why everything is so effing slow with these huge bumbling bureaucracies with their weird, naive worldview. And it's cruel what we do to kids now.
But who would be better? I mean, how, like if you just take this with the education system, because, you know, I kind of have this feeling that, you can't just pick, like 20 years ago, you could just say, okay, I'm just going to be a librarian, and then you just be a librarian.
Right.
Now, if you do that, then okay.
Did you say 20 years ago?
Yeah, or...
Oof. You're kind. I had 30, 40.
Okay.
Yeah. Since 2000, honestly, there's been... I feel very lucky. I graduated in 1999, and I was promised that I would get graduate level fast track jobs. And in fairness to the university, I got 3 inside of 5 years. So I have no complaints. But I feel massive sympathy for everybody who came after me, because I was the last. I was the last graduate, I think, or last of the graduates where it meant anything. And even then it was a struggle. But choosing a job saying I'm a car mechanic or a librarian for life, I would say 40 years ago. Probably. It's become, it's brutal. The employment marketplace has been savage for a long time, I think.
Because then you kind of go out there and I have the sense I'm lucky enough to kind of have around me a lot of much younger people than myself, most of them that I could be their father. And it's fascinating in some way, but it's also scary in some way that many of them are very multi-talented.
Yeah.
And they can do a lot of different things, whether it being art or being creative or whatever, or business even. But on the other hand, I feel maybe because of this, what we're talking about, you couldn't really pick one identity and just run with that thing.
Right.
That they are faced with the fear of missing out on something by choosing something one.
Yeah.
So you could get a person for a job interview, like, and you will say, okay, we would really like to work for us. No, I just want to work 2 days a week for you because I want to work 2 days a week in that cafe, or I want to work in the art gallery or something.
Yeah.
And in the end, you're nothing. Or you know what I mean?
You're a pleasant, multi-talented, interesting, colorful, high energy nothing. Yeah, I agree. I see them all the time.
And I don't mean that in a bad way.
No. But I think even millennials will cop for this. Millennials are pretty self-aware, and they suffer from narcissism, but they also have the humility to know there's something up with their generation.
They have their own terms, adulting, and like they've created words around this.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, so they have somehow this fear of choosing a path that they then feel comfortable with, and they're scrambling nonstop for something new.
Yeah.
And all the validation then eventually comes somehow from the outside, right?
Yes.
I mean, it has to be, and that's social media and
well, yeah, and they just dissipate. They lose their youth. I actually had a millennial come to me just 2 weeks ago. She lives in Prague, and you know the scene amongst 20-somethings in Prague. It's bohemian, it's cool, everybody plays an instrument, and they can rap, and they can finger paint, and Jesus knows what. And she came to me, she was trying to ask me how to get into therapy. And so I just said to her, like, what do you want? And she couldn't answer me. I mean, you've got this, so she's turning 30. She has the vague notion she wants to do something therapeutic, but she couldn't say for who or why or how. And I'm like, I feel so fucking sorry for these kids. They were taught no critical thinking. They're not taught how to reason. They can't even formulate a question. No wonder they can't get anywhere. I cut you off a little bit before. You were going to say to me, who should be the people who run the education system?
Yeah.
Well, my answer, which I want to give because I think it's going to make me sound clever, is nobody who wants to. So if you want to be in the education system, that's not happening. So in my military dictatorship, we would take at gunpoint entrepreneurs, people who have built something in the world
And put them in the schools.
force that. Why would a millionaire, why would I go back to school? I'm making money. You'd have to point a gun at me because you can't pay me enough. I mean, that sounds really arrogant, but I know the education system could not afford my fee. So I would need a military junta to point a gun at me and go, comrade, it is your time. You go to teach now. and you're not being paid for it. We'll give you a sandwich a day. And that's what needs to happen. Same thing in government. Who should be making these policies? Who should be deciding how we respond to the pandemic? Well, in my fantasy, it would be a crack team of epidemiologists and retired army generals. That would be them together. You know what we have in the UK? We have SAGE. It's 90% psychologists. Why the fuck are psychologists deciding how a nation responds to a pandemic? It's fucking outrageous. I want virologists, military generals, people who have got shit, people who know their subject and have got shit done. There shouldn't be anybody else there. It's like psychologists. What? Consult them for one day as a means of messaging to the people. But it's such a good question. We have to look at the power structures here and say, who's in charge of this? Why are they doing it this way? Surely we can do better. And we absolutely can do so much better than we're doing now. We're wasting so much time and resources.
I mean, in some, in short to say, I mean, like we have obviously somehow a broken system, both of parenting in some way and it's the school system doesn't help, so we get out those individuals that are lacking identity. And when I say this, then I start thinking, okay, so why did I go to university? Why did I do my law degree? I did it because... Did
you do a law degree?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did you ever work in law?
No.
Okay.
But I have the bar exam. I could.
You could work in law, yeah.
But I actually my diploma, my bar exam diploma is in the Ministry of Justice in Iceland. I never even picked it up.
Really?
Because I had a job already that was more interesting, and I went into business. But anyway, so I started thinking, okay, so what was my key driver? It was the fear of my fucking parents.
Yeah.
And it was the fear of, they said to me when I was, a teenager, listen, this is not a house for losers. If you're not working, you're in school. If you're not in school, you're paying rent.
Right.
And I'm not going to pay these bastards some rent. And that was enough.
Yeah.
So that kind of kept me in school. Okay, I took a break. I had a job for a year before I went into university. But it was always this, and my parents are not super educated or not educated at all. And there was no pressure of getting anything specific, but it was just, you have to become something.
Yes.
And it was never, I don't know, I didn't hear the words, you can become whatever you want. You just have to become something. Pick one thing.
Yeah.
So in some way,
they're two very, very, very different messages, by the way. You can be whatever you want is utter nonsense. You must be something is totally achievable.
Yeah.
But they sound sort of similar.
Exactly.
But they're totally separate realities. I was told the same thing. I'm the first person in my family to go to university, first person with a degree, and the first person to have a private education. And the pressure was on me. My whole family looked at me and was like, well, the schools say you're bright, you better fucking do something. And they're all Irish immigrants, so you work. The only sin in life is to be a bum, is to be we don't even care what you do, but you hold down one or two jobs, you have a side hustle, you have your mate. Everybody works. Everybody runs businesses. Everybody in my family is an entrepreneur. As long as you work, you're okay. Thank you. It sucked. I hated my childhood, but thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm very thankful now.
Yeah.
But this is gone, and that's this you don't really hear anymore. You hear more of this. You can be anything you want. You don't really need to choose. We're actually telling people the opposite in a way.
You're telling them the opposite, and it's worse. You should hear the shit that is said to kids in schools. They're told total lies. The British education system, through the private company that I worked for, headhunted me, and they tried to get me for a governmental drive called Aim Higher. And they were gonna pay me good money to go into schools and pressure kids to go to university, telling those kids, if you go to university, you'll get higher salary jobs. And I was like, but the statistics don't say that. That's actually not true. And they're like, well,
you're going to say it anyway.
Just fucking say it anyway. And I was like, yes, so that you can get these kids. So the government drives the kids into university and then harvests the crop of their student debt and keeps them as indentured slaves for life. So I refused to do it. The other thing that they were saying in school was, not only you can be anything, but something that I really hate, it's a pet peeve. They say choose a role as though anybody, like, do you want to be a doctor? And I'm saying to these teachers, like, why the fuck are you saying to a classroom full of morons that, you know, do you want to, that's cruel. None of these kids, are you fucking kidding me? They need straight A's at A level in science. These kids aren't even going to pass their GCSEs. What are you saying? And they're like, oh, well, you know. No, I don't know. I mean, this is just fantasy right now. Why are you saying this to them? So there's that dangerous tactic as well. Saying, oh, you can be this, you can be that, you can be the other. No, you can't actually, because some of you are not intellectually capable of it. I'm not. I couldn't be a doctor. My brain doesn't work. I'd break if you tried to train me in medicine or law. If you tried to get me through a law degree, I would really struggle. My intelligence is towards like words and creativity. I couldn't.
You're a content creator.
I'm a content creator. Yeah. As I said, I don't want all these rules. My God, a science degree would kill me. Yeah. So that is a problem as well. Like it's anybody can be anything, pick something and go for it. And if you dream hard enough, kid, you'll make it. Why would you say that to somebody? Why are you setting them up for such heartbreak? And what happens with these kids? It's the same story every time. They turn 30 and they get really fucking depressed because they slowly dawns on them that the fantasy is never going to come true. Somewhere between 30 and 35. Massively depressed, full of despair and rage, justifiably, I think.
Yeah, because then you kind of, I don't know, it sounds really like two old guys talking badly about younger generation, but that's it. Fuck it. I mean, it's my podcast. We can talk whatever we want. And
these bloody kids.
Yeah. No, I mean it. But I think every generation said that about the previous one and or the next one or whatever. But it is what it is. It's a real issue, and even the people who belong to that generation are talking about it. I mean, that's an obvious sign.
And we have science that backs it, and we are moving. We have been moving across the generations in a certain direction, and I would say the accusations that were thrown by my grandparents at my parents, who are my grandparents, you know, my grandfather fought in World War II. What he was saying about my parents, who are baby boomers, is true. And they were and are a very narcissistic generation. But according to the research that you sent to me, they're nowhere near as dangerously narcissistic as this generation.
New ones.
Yeah. So we have to sort of say, well, maybe we're in different waves of the same phenomena that's moving in a direction. And God knows, why wouldn't we be more narcissistic compared to 1850? We were all serfs. We were all peasants, uneducated. You and I would have been working with our hands in a mill somewhere, spunking out kids. Half of them would have died, no teeth, drunk all the time.
So and then we would have to show up and fight the war for the landlord, you know, somewhere.
Exactly. You'd have to go and kill other lower class serfs who spoke German or something on behalf of the nobility. So of course we're more narcissistic. I mean that's an effect of progress, and I don't think we should be shy or shy about being judgmental, because you do need to use your judgment. You do need to tell the truth. This is a problem that we're facing for sure.
Yeah, but I feel that is I don't know. It's so. In some way, we're talking about a generation that kind of groomed into social media.
Yeah.
And both that plus, and then the echo chambers that social media creates, because we follow people that share the same opinions. We see only how do you say, builds up our idea about the world and ourselves, etc., etc. We get the validation from there, and we have maybe been overparented somehow or overprotected by our parents. So you actually end up with an individual that maybe feels I am nothing, but I'm still all those vague things that are around me, and you want to display something. You wanna show your importance or whatever by, I don't know. I go on my motorbike on Instagram and show pictures of it to validate myself. But the minute that someone criticizes me, it all falls apart somehow. And it makes me hostile because I belong to, I don't know, my beliefs and they've never really been challenged. There's never been this external threat to my belief system or whatever. So what I feel now is that we have those individuals that they don't feel anything on the inside, not necessarily something real. They're a little bit lost.
I think there's I think you used the phrase before we started recording of people being hollowed out. There is a hollowing because if you're in an environment where nothing inside of you is of any value, and the only value you can have is through external performative false artificial actions and an artificial lifestyle, you will neurologically wire to the external and you'll ignore the internal. And so you will become a hollow human because, well, all of your authentic experiences are rendered meaningless. The only solution I can see here is to retrain people to sort of rewire to authenticity and away from the virtual and away from the artificial, which would, at this point would be a really hard job, but it might be done for us by the coming crisis. So if there is a hot war, well, the internet will go. One of the first things that's happened is they'll attack the internet so we can't talk to each other.
So some sort of a reset.
There will be a reset. I mean, people are whinging. They're saying to me all the time, talk about the Great Reset, and I'm like, you're all talking about it like it's some evil Illuminati conspiracy theory. Okay, fine. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think you're going to live 2018 for the rest of your life? I got news for you, kids. That was never going to happen. There was no economist, no philosopher, no public intellectual that was saying, don't worry, guys, this party is going to go on forever. Everybody was saying this has to end. It has to end. It's just not sustainable. So there will be, whether we like it or not, a crisis, a series of crises. Maybe it's this one. If it's not this one, if this passes, don't breathe a sigh of relief. Something else will come along because we are, as a species, at crisis point. We've hit this a certain level that it just requires a sort of a resetting of everything, and that will be traumatic. I mean, history dictates. Yeah,
it's never been easy.
It's never fun.
No.
If people wanted, how can we do this the nicest way possible? I would say everybody just has to take psychedelics
for a decade or so.
For a decade or so, which will be its own trauma, but it'll be better than the bombing and the killing and the genocide and the raping.
Yeah.